My people have lived on this land for generations, and we will not be moved. You must go now. They are here.
I can still hear that day if I close my eyes. A rope creaking somewhere in the dark, a woman breathing like she'd run out of choices, and the wind steady, watching, asking me if I'd keep riding or finally stop to do what was right. Red Butte, New Mexico Territory, 1881. The wind came slicing down from the mesa, thin and bitter, the kind that carries dust and memory in the same breath. It cut across my face like ground iron, dry and sharp. I was out on the north line, checking fence, nothing heroic, just wire, staples, and silence. A man can spend years doing such work and still find it steadying. Sage, my mare, shifted under me, her ears twitching to something the horizon hadn't decided to share yet. The land was holding its breath. I could feel it, the same stillness that comes right before lightning splits the sky. Then I saw it, a color that didn't belong, red. Not sunset, not rust, but a bright thread against gray boards, fluttering at the old grain shed down by the arroyo. It moved wrong, like something caught halfway between wind and pain. I nudged Sage forward, gravel hissing beneath her hooves. The door of the shed hung crooked, clapping against its frame, slow as a dying heartbeat. When I got close, the smell hit first dust, old grain, and fear. Fear has its own scent out here. It smells like iron left too long in the rain. I pushed the door open. Light fell in, raw and uneven. And there she was, a woman hanging from the rafters, wrists bound tight with twisted rope. A Navajo weave, crimson and black, circled one arm like the memory of blood. Her boots barely grazed the top of a rolling barrel, each breath a bargain with gravity. Her head turned when the door creaked. No scream. Just eyes that had already seen the worst and measured me as part of it. Easy, I said, voice low. I'm here to cut you down. Oh, if you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away, and if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. The knife slid through the rope, and her weight fell into my arms, light but trembling, the kind of trembling that comes after too many hours of silence. Her skin was cold where it should have been sweat. She tried to stand. I steadied her, feeling bones and willpower under my hands. Water, she whispered. I passed her my canteen. She drank like someone remembering how. 4 swallows, then a breath. Her eyes steadied, brown and deep as dusk over the mesa. My name's Jack Mercer, I said. Who left you like this? She looked at me a long time before answering. A man who buys debts. His name is Slade Barrow, but the debt wasn't mine. Debts. Always the same currency out here, land, blood, or women. Can you walk? I asked. She nodded once. I cut the last of the bindings and helped her outside. The air hit her face and she blinked, as if sunlight was something you had to relearn. The world went quiet for a heartbeat, no wind, no birds, just us and the shed behind, breathing dust. And I felt that old question rise again, the one the West keeps asking men like me. Will you look away, or will you do something about it? I'd buried too much not to know the answer. Come on, I said. There's shade and food at my place. The rest we'll figure out after. Oh. We rode slow beneath a sky the color of burned tin. The fence wire sang in the wind like a hymn, with only 2 notes, duty and consequence. I didn't know yet that the girl's name was Aiyana, or that saving her would light a fire that had burned through half the valley. But that's the thing about mercy in the West, it always costs you something. And by sundown, I was already in debt. The wagon rattled down the ridge road like a loose tooth in the jaw of the land. By the time it rolled within hailing distance, I could count the nails in its sideboards and the lies on the driver's face. He was a thin-boned fellow with a mustache that tried to be bigger than he was. Riding alongside came a man I knew by reputation, if not by handshake, Jesse Pike, one of Slade Barrow's little cogs, always turning, always squeaking. The third rider, clinging behind the wagon, kept his hat pulled low. Folks who wear their hats that low aren't guarding against sun, they're guarding against being known. I set myself in the mouth of the yard where the wheel ruts open into my world. No gun in my hand. That comes later if it has to. A man can say 1,000 things before he says it with iron. "Mornin'," I called. Wynne took the word and set it down between us. "If you're selling Bibles, you'll find I've read the only verse I need." Jesse grinned, showing too many teeth. "Heard you've taken in a stray, Mr. Mercer. A red shawl and fast feet. We're here to collect what's been misplaced." "Misplaced is what happens to handkerchiefs," I said. "Human beings don't get misplaced on my land. You make your claim in town, not here." The thin-boned driver chirped the reins, and the wagon rocked forward a wheel roll, just enough to test the gait in me. I didn't move. The third rider lifted his head a little, thinking maybe he knew my face. I let him look. Some men change when they get old. Me, I got legible. "You misunderstand our authority," Jesse said, as if practicing for a badge he'd never earn. "Given debts and all, the lady in question is a pledge on a note that's come due." "Debts," I said. "You boys use that word like a spine you've borrowed. You leave a girl hanging in a grain shed, and then you come to a man's yard and talk about authority." Jesse's grin thinned. It was temporary. She wasn't harmed. Behind me, on the porch, the screen door clicked once. Aiyana didn't step out, but I knew she was there. Knowing it made something lift the latch in my chest that I keep for storms, I spoke it simple. "She's under my roof," I said. "The only way she leaves is if she walks to the road on her own 2 feet, by her own choosing, not a whisker sooner." Jesse exchanged a look with the driver, the kind men swap when they've measured a plank and don't like the numbers. "You making yourself a party to the debt, old man?" "I'm making myself a party to decency." He weighed his chances. We all do. Every hour of the day. The third rider finally spoke, voice young and trying to be mean. "Slade ain't gonna like this." "Tell him," I said, "that offense is offense whether he likes it or not." Oh, they left, because there wasn't anything else to do that wouldn't cost them hide. They went slow enough to keep their pride from breaking. When they topped the ridge, the wagon's shadow crawled off my yard like a bad thought leaving a drunk. Aiyana stepped onto the porch then, the light taking its time to find her. She had tied her hair back with the red cloth. The rope burns on her wrists were clean and oiled. She didn't smile. It wasn't a smiling kind of morning, but I saw the line of her shoulders ease half a finger's width. "You have made a storm," she said. "Storms don't need much help around here," I said. "But yes, it started." She glanced at the horizon, then at me. "I do not want men to die because of my breath." "Men die for worse reasons every day," I said. "Living for a good reason might balance some books." She considered that, and the silence lengthened the way good cedar does in a fire, slow, aromatic, necessary. We spent the day the way decent people spend battle leaves, working. I send a boy from the Mexican quarter mile, post a runner who carries messages for a dime and a biscuit down to Doña Rosa's place. If trouble was coming, I wanted friendly eyes to know about it. I mended the hinge on the feed room door. Aiyana insisted on helping, and I was careful to let help be help, not a performance of charity. She held the board. I set the nail. The rhythm of it held back the talk we both knew we'd have to have. Toward evening, a dust devil danced itself to pieces beyond the east pasture. Coyotes began their complaints early, as if the night had arrived before the sun agreed. I told Aiyana we'd ride at first light into Pinyon Creek to put something on paper at the sheriff's, if not the law. Then at least a record that says these 2 souls stood here and spoke the truth. She nodded. "Truth is a small horse," she said, "but it runs without tiring." Night came on clean. I kept a lamp burning in the front window. It's a custom out here and older than any of us, a light to say this house believes in mourning. I took the rocker by the door and cleaned my rifle not as an invitation, just as a way to tell my hands to be steady. Aiyana sat at the table and rewrapped her wrists with salve that smelled like pine and something bitter. Without asking, she began to hum. The tune wasn't one I knew, but it did what good tunes do. It stitched the edges of the room together. Close to midnight, a horse clattered through the yard, then checked itself. I rose, not fast, and eased the door wide enough for a voice to fit. "Jack?" The voice was Reverend Talley, worn thin as the pages he loves. "That you? Come in out of the dark, Reverend." He stepped into the lamp swale, hat in both hands, looking like a man who'd been given news and told not to drop it. His eyes found Aiyana and didn't flinch. "He's buried people from more nations than I've got words for. Even miss," he said, "I hear foolishness riding our way. Foolishness with money and friends," I said. He sighed, slow. "Sheriff's catching heat." Slade's boys were in his office at sundown, talking about stolen silver and a woman luring decent men to sin. He said the last as if he wished he could wash the taste of it from his mouth. "Thought you ought to know." Aiyana's hands tightened around the cloth, and then loosened by choice. "They take what they want and then say we took it," she said. No bitterness, just a fact laid on the table. "Reverend," I said, "tomorrow first light we come in to speak our piece. I'll ask you to be there. And if you'd be so kind, stop by Doña Rosa's on your way home. She knows who is honest in Pinyon Creek, and who only plays at it." "I will," he said. He looked at Aiyana again, and something in his old griefs recognized something in hers. "Miss, you need anything right this minute?" She shook her head. "I need the morning." "Don't we all?" he said, and tipped his hat. When he'd gone, the house got quiet the way a house does when it's listening for boots. I took my bedroll to the front room and left the bedroom to Aiyana. She didn't argue. There are arguments worth having, and arguments that are just ways to scare ourselves. We both needed sleep that wasn't a debate. Before first light, Sage nickered and the windmill complained at a new direction of wind. We ate hot bread and coffee that remembered better beans. I saddled the mare and the sorrel for Aiyana. She put her foot in the stirrup like a person who grew up with horses but learned not to boast about it. We set off while the east was still deciding whether to confess. By the time the sun telegraphed its first line across the flats, Pinyon Creek sat ahead of us, tuckered and surly, a strip of board fronts, a church that tried to keep its paint, a sheriff's office with a hitching rail that had seen too many apologies. I felt Aiyana's back go still. She didn't slow. Courage has many names. Today it wore her face. We tied off and stepped up onto the boardwalk. People looked and then looked away in the old American way. I tipped my hat to every last one of them, not asking for favor, only acknowledging humanity where it's Saturday. Inside the office, Sheriff Doolin stood with his thumbs in his belt, and two of Slade's papermen stood behind him like bookends. "Morning, Jack," Doolin said, a wrinkle already in the talk. "You brought company." "I brought truth," I said. "She has a name. Aiyana." The papermen shifted. One of them opened his mouth, but I held up a palm and saved us all some time. "Before you rehearse your lies, Sheriff, write this down. The woman speaks for herself." And she did. She told it plain, without ornament. Not a sob in it, not a plea, just a ledger read aloud. Who tied the knot, who ordered, who watched, who took. The sheriff's eyes did that thing honest eyes do when the world doesn't fit the badge. He looked older by a year in 1 minute. When she finished, the office balanced on a knife. I saw in Doolin the calculation men like Slade pay cash and pay quick. Men like me pay slow with friendship and work, and being the fellow who comes when someone hollers. It isn't a fair math, but it's the only one this land has ever learned. "Jack," he said soft, "this puts you in the river with a fast current." "I've swum worse," I said. "The question is whether your office can stand looking in the glass in the morning." "Oh." Before he could answer, a shadow filled the doorway, and the smell of cigar that cost more than a ranch hand's wage rode in on a boot heel. Slade Barrow didn't waste time on introductions. He put his hand on the sheriff's desk, as if it were a rock with his name carved in it. "Morning," he said, and smiled without showing teeth. "Seems we got ourselves a matter of property that strayed." I turned to face him and let him see all 56 of my years at once. "Not property," I said, "not strayed," and the day drew its breath to see what we'd all do next. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second, and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. Barrow's hands were soft, and that's how you know he hires his courage. He laid 2 documents on the sheriff's desk like a preacher setting down tablets. "Notes," he said, "lawful, witnessed, A pledge assigned and accepted. I don't take what isn't owed, Sheriff. I merely collect. Doolin squinted at the papers, buying time he didn't own. I stepped half a pace, so I was between Aiyana and the door without making a sermon of it. The two papermen shifted to a different kind of posture, the kind that thinks it understands force because it has seen it pass by. Aiyana spoke first. "Show me where I signed," she said, calm as a winter star. Barrow didn't look at her. The pledge was family. Her kin had agency. "Agency to sell a horse," I said, "and even that's dicey without brand papers. Agency to sell a woman belongs to the devil alone." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Slade, the law don't run on pledges of people. You know that." He smiled, that small, unsalted smile. "The law runs on money, Eli, same as always." He tapped the top document. "Your salary meets my books twice a month. I pay the men who keep your town alive. Sometimes the loudest gun is a ledger." I put a palm on the desk and pushed the papers back to him an inch. "You can bring all the notes you like. You can bring a brass band to play them in. You can't bring that woman out of this office against her will, not while I breathe." Barrow looked at me then, really looked. He saw a man whose hair had gone to winter, whose hands had built a life nail by nail, whose eyes had buried more than one dream and kept harvesting anyway. He mistook all that for softness. "You're alone, Mercer," he said. "This territory belongs to more modern arrangements." "Modern arrangements still bleed when they get cut," I said, "and I'm good with a knife." "Bye?" The papermen bristled. Doolin lifted both hands like a schoolteacher catching a fight in the hall. "Everybody cool their biscuits," he said. "We're going to do this by daylight. Slade, you want to make a claim. You file it, and we'll see whose words line up with whose tracks. Jack, you and the lady can lodge a statement, and—" The door behind us banged open. Doña Rosa swept in like weather, with Reverend Talley at her elbow and a boy from the freight yard peeking around her skirt. "Sheriff," she said, "I came to speak of seeing. I saw, and I can point where." Her accent laid roses around the words and left thorns underneath. "Men with Slade's blue kerchiefs took this girl, tied her. I can stand with this truth in any church or courthouse." Talley nodded, face grave. "And I can swear to the woman's character. I've seen her mend neighbors' blankets at our mission without coin, because kindness asked." Barrow turned his smile on them and found it didn't fit. He gathered his papers, eyes cooling. "We will revisit," he said to the sheriff, and to me. "You won't like how this story ends." "Maybe not," I said, "but I'll like who I am in it." He left. The papermen trailed, brittle as twigs. The office breathed again. Doolin sagged against the desk as if the badge weighed him down with its 3 ounces of dream and duty. "All right," he said. "Statements. Witnesses. We'll start a record that says we did more than look away." We wrote things down. The pen scratched a track I hoped the future could follow. When we stepped back into the morning, the town stared with that particular hunger it saves for scandal. Aiyana didn't shrink. She walked with me down the boardwalk like a drumbeat. If you'd asked me then what I felt, I'd have lied and said tired. The word for it was responsibility, and it sat on me like a saddle that knew my shape. We reached Rosa's cantina at noon. She fed us sopa and set a quiet corner aside. "You will need friends," she said, practical as a ledger. "Slade owns a stable of them. I own fewer, but they are heavier." She listed names. Deputy Lewis, clean in the eyes. Old man Cardenas, who keeps books and secrets. Marta the midwife, who hears everything and forgets nothing. "Tonight I will send word." After we ate, I took Aiyana to the general store to buy salve and thread she liked. Folks watched. A boy whispered a question his mother didn't shush fast enough. Aiyana answered him, gentle, in her own tongue, and his eyes grew bright because he'd learned a new sound in a day that wanted to be ugly. When we got back to the ranch, a note waited on my gatepost, pinned with a knife that didn't mind rust. One sentence in a hand that wasn't trying to impress the schoolmarm. "Pay the debt or the debt will take breath." No signature, didn't need one. I folded the note and put it in my pocket with the other things I've survived. "They talk better than they shoot," I told Aiyana, "because sometimes the best we can give each other is an inch of laughter." Evening draped itself over the hills with the tired grace of an old quilt. I set an extra plate on the table without saying why. She noticed and didn't object. The conversation we had then isn't one I could set down exactly. It ran like a creek in drought under the surface, then showing itself, then gone again. But I can tell you the shape of it, where she came from, who taught her to weave, and why red belongs with black. The cousin who used to bring her wild plums and then learned to bring trouble. The day I buried a son small enough to fit between my two hands. When the lamp burned low, she said, "You lost trust." "I lost the habit of it," I said. "Trust's still there. It just doesn't speak unless called by name." She stood, set her cup down, and looked out the window. "Then call it." Lo! Outside, the coyotes tuned their long song. The windmill spun once, twice, then rested, as if listening with us. "Trust," I said. The word felt foolish and holy, like most good things. She didn't smile. She nodded, as if at a work begun. We slept with rifles close not as bravado, but because fear respects preparation. In the black hour before dawn, horses moved at the lower fence line, not stealing, not fleeing scouting. I stepped onto the porch and tasted the air. Trouble leaves a tang like the penny copper of blood, even when nobody's cut yet. We kept the lamps low. I set a kettle to sing, because in a world like this one, you keep your small civilities intact, or you lose yourself faster than any outlaw can take you. The first shot came when the kettle reached its high note, as if some mean-spirited god liked to accompany his own work. The round took a splinter off the porch post 2 handspans from my shoulder. I dragged the lamp down with one sweep, and the house exhaled darkness. "Aiyana," I said, and she was already belly to the floor, moving like a woman who'd been taught by the land itself how to make herself stone. 2 more shots, wide. Boys learning. I gave them my silence as a teacher's note. Then I slid to the window and sent one answer back. Not to kill, just to shave a hat brim and mark a cheek with the truth. A yelp. Hooves scrambled. The fence sang again, and then the night was only crickets and my own breath. We waited long minutes. Patience is a kind of aim. "They will return," Aiyana whispered. "Yes," I said, "but we'll be here when they do." She turned her face toward the sound of me in the dark. Then maybe trust learned its name. And that is how a house that had been only lumber and meal sacks and the stubbornness of an old man became something else. Not a fortress, fortresses fall. A promise. Promises, when kept, make a country out of thin boards and wide spaces. Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you. Dawn fanned out over the flats in thin peach stripes, and the kettle sang again as if last night had been a bad dream that left only a taste of metal. I saddled Sage in the roan, while Aiyana made coffee stout enough to lift a mule. The porch bore a new scar where the bullet kissed it, nothing a plain and a patient hour couldn't fix. I left it there a while. A wound tells you where to mend. "We go back to town," I said, "but not empty-handed." She nodded, already reading my mind. In a country like this, you live half your life in other folks' silences. You learn to hear the rest. We rode out toward the old freight trail, where Slade's wagon sometimes drifted at odd hours with tarps tied a little too careful. A raven traced us at height like a scrawled question mark on the sky. By mid-morning we reached Cardenas's way station, a low stone house with a scale that had judged more beans and lies than any church confessional. Old man Cardenas stepped out with his spectacles riding low. "Mercer," he said, "and company. I heard the night had opinions at your place." "It did," I said. "I aim to have a few of my own." We went inside where the ledger lived, and the air smelled of ink and coffee. Aiyana stood by the window, eyes scanning the road like a hawk measuring the wind. Cardenas flipped pages until he found the ones whose edges looked tired. "Slade's boys came through last 6 weeks with crates that weren't on any bill," he said, tapping a column. "Weight for dry goods that weighed like water and rang like silver when you nudged it." I wrote what they told me, because a man has to choose which truth to bleed for. But I kept a second book, the way a conscience keeps a second heartbeat. He fetched it from beneath a floorboard with the reverence of a man lifting a cradle. Columns marked in his careful hand. Dates, times, initials, the kind of details Doolin could not ignore if he wanted to shave without cutting himself in the morning. I ran a finger along the margins. There, a notch, JP for Jesse Pike. There, another SB never writes his own name, but his shadow does. You'll swear to it? I asked. I'll swear like a man who has lived long enough to be tired of watching boys become wolves, Cardenas said. Besides, I never liked a ledger that lied to me. Oh, we left with copies and a promise. Aiyana's shoulders had the same look fences get after you pull them, true tension, yes, but honor in it. On the ride back, a dust plume teased the horizon, too small for a wagon and too quick for cattle. I felt the change move through her body before I saw the riders, too, moving lazy with purpose. Slade's knit, she said. Jesse, and the new one who hides behind hats. Hat hider was learning to shoot last night, I said. Maybe today he learns to think. Though, we angled toward the cottonwood draw, letting the land do what God made it for, give good men cover. Sage knew the game and set her hooves soft. I led Aiyana to a split in the arroyo wall where a man could watch the world and choose his hour. They came by like coyotes trying on lion voices. Jesse called out, "Mercer, heard you're collecting papers. We brought a different kind." He fired two into the air to let the echo practice. I lay my cheek to the stock and drew a bead on the iron ring of his stirrup, sent a kiss of lead that rang it like a dinner bell. The roan under him crow-hopped, and Jesse cussed an alphabet. "Enough," I said, stepping out where they could see me while Aiyana stayed high and hidden. "Your boss has a date with ink. You boys can either keep riding and arrive with him, or you can make a ruckus and arrive with rope burns." Oh. They looked at each other, young men at the fork where pride goes right and wisdom goes left. Pride wins unless it's outnumbered. Today, by the grace of dry grass and tired souls, it was. They rode off, throwing back threats as light as chaff. I waited until they were a page distant before giving Aiyana the all-clear. "Why didn't you shoot them harder?" she asked, not accusing curious the way a healer asks how a scar began. "Because I want them alive to read what's coming." "Oh?" Back at the ranch, we found Deputy Lewis waiting, hat in hand and patience bottled up like rain. "Jack," he said, "Sheriff sent me quiet. Way. Slade stirring his pot. Says you're harboring a thief and worse. But I got an ear for brass from Wind, and this Wind's bought. You got something I can hold up like a mirror in a courtroom." I handed him Cardenas's copies and the note from my fence post. "You'll want Reverend Talley and Doña Rosa to stand with us," I said. "And Marta, she knows whose bruises tell the truth." Lewis squared his shoulders as if somebody took a stone off them. "Tomorrow noon," he said. "Informal hearing. Not a full court, but enough of a stage. I'll make sure the crowd isn't all Slade's cousins and debtors." After he'd gone, Aiyana and I did the only sane thing you can do the day before you step into a room where words may turn to bullets. We worked. She set a loom between two porch posts with a warp she'd kept in a bundle, hands moving in a pattern older than the county line. I split kindling until the axe found its old music. The shavings flew and the rhythm took me back to when my hands were younger and the world had other names for me: scout, husband, father. Names get heavy when you have to carry them alone. Doing an honest job makes them lighter. By sundown, the first strip of her weaving showed itself, red and black and white, thunderbolt shapes with a small break at the edge. "For mercy," she said when I asked. "Every strong thing must leave a small door for mercy, or it becomes the thing it hates." I nodded, and I hope I learned it. Night came with a coolness that felt like a promise if you didn't look too close. I walked the fence one last time. Aiyana paced the length of the porch like a sentry who sings to the stars inside her head. When we met by the steps, she touched the bullet score in the post. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," I agreed. "We tell the truth where men prefer stories." The sun rose on Pinyon Creek as if it had misgivings. The street wore its Sunday face on a Tuesday, folk out of work pretending to shop, boys climbing their father's boot shadows, women with hands on hips, saying without words that they had soap and memory and knew how to use both. Sheriff Doolin stood in the doorway of his office with the look a man gets when he's about to perform surgery on his own conscience. Inside, the tables were pushed to the walls. A deputy set chairs for witnesses. Slade arrived with a slice of the town at his back, merchants on his ledger, men who owe him drink, one mean-eyed horse trader who thinks cruelty is thrift. Jesse Pike took a post near the stove. The hat hider tried to look like a wall. Deputy Lewis opened the show with the choking courtesy the law uses when it knows it's outnumbered, but not outgunned. We're here to hear statements regarding allegations of unlawful detention and assault pertaining to Miss Aiyana Nez, he said. Also to hear counter-allegations of theft. He looked at me, then at Slade, as if measuring who would spit first. Slade stood smooth. Sheriff, I've no wish to drag a lady through town talk. A debt was pledged by her kin, witnessed. He tapped a folder. Silver went missing from a shipment thereafter. I make no great claims. Only that this young woman be returned to her rightful guardians until the matter is settled. Then, a murmur went through the room, the nasty little thrill people get from the phrase rightful guardians. I kept my face aboard. Miss Nez, Lewis said. You'll speak? Aiyana rose. She did not bow. She did not flinch before the stares. She placed one hand on the back of the chair as if it were a tree and let her voice be the rest. I am a person, she said. Not a pledge, not a crate. My cousin's husband made his trouble and promised my breath to pay it. I would not go. Men tied me in a dark house and left me for their buyer. This is true. She lifted her wrists and the rope burns did the talking. I took nothing. I do not need white silver to buy what my hands can make. Doña Rosa stepped forward without waiting to be called. I saw 2 of Slade's men tie this girl, she said, chin up. I can point. I can say their names before God, and after. Reverend Talley stood beside her and spoke what preachers speak when they're tired of funerals. Marta came last, small and fierce, and told how she'd treated bruises on other girls who did not have Aiyana's courage to stand in a room and speak. Deputy Lewis laid Cardenas's ledger on the desk like scripture. This shows contraband shipments, he said. Weighed off by pounds. Slade's initials in the shadows. Slade smiled, the way a man smiles when he's set a second snare. Interesting paper, he said. Curious witnesses. But I have something cleaner. He snapped his fingers. The door opened, and Ephraim Nez, the cousin's husband, limped in with a bandaged ankle and a well-rehearsed sorrow. With him came Lena, the cousin pretty once, now brittle as a drought peach. They gave their testimonies the way actors give lines when there's money backstage. She ran wild, Lena said. She stole from us. She shamed us. Ephraim swore to a gentle arrangement and temporary care. His eyes slid off Aiyana's face like oil off water. Then came Barrow's masterstroke, a little sack of coins set on the desk with the clink of theater. Found under the Nez hut, he said. Stamped silver. Same mark as my crates. A simple soul might think it was taken. It was too neat by half, but neatness sells. The room leaned his way. I felt the tide tug at my knees. Aiyana looked at me, not for rescue, just to see if the line we drew was still there. It's planted, I said, calm enough to hear my own heart. And I can prove it. How? I turned to Marta. You were with Doña Rosa the afternoon those men came to the mission. She nodded. And you treated Ephraim for a sprained ankle the evening after. Another nod. Tell the room which ankle. Left, she said. Stepped in a gopher hole while he ran from sense. I lifted the little sack and handed it to Deputy Lewis. Sheriff, ask Ephraim to pick this up and walk it to the door and back without wincing. Oh, it was a petty play, and I felt foolish while I made it, but the truth lives wherever it can get air. Ephraim grabbed the bag, put weight on his right leg, and hissed through his teeth when the left took the load. The room saw it. The room wanted not to see it. But once truth puts a toe in the door, it's hard to slam it without losing fingers. More, I said softly. Cardenas. The old man raised a hand. That coin bag, he said, still has flour on it from my storeroom shelf. I counted out such a bag in Jesse Pike's presence 2 days back when he insisted on paying in coin for a shipment written as cloth. Flour dust is a jealous witness. It doesn't move twice the same day. The tide turned. Not a wave. Not yet, but a list. The kind that makes a ship's captain send for prayer. Slade's mouth thin. "Sheriff," Deputy Lewis said, "we have enough to hold Pike and Ephraim pending territorial judge review. We have enough to place Miss Nez under protection as a free person with agency." Doolin looked at the crowd, looked at his badge, looked at me. I didn't blink. He took a breath he'd been owing himself a year. "So ordered," he said. "It wasn't salvation. It was a hinge. Hinges can carry a lot if you keep them oiled with courage. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters." You'd think a word from a sheriff would end a trouble, but the West teaches different. Trouble is a river. Law is a rock. The water learns to go around. We rode home under a sky that had cooled to pewter. The land smelled like rain thinking about itself. Aiyana didn't speak much. She didn't have to. Quiet carries meaning when it's earned. At the Cottonwood we stopped because I always stop there. A place becomes a friend if you let it. "Tomorrow," she said, "they will try again." "Uff." "They will," I said. "And the day after. And then less. And then not at all." She turned in the saddle and looked at the spread. The barn leaned the way old men lean when they listen better than they talk. The windmill wagged a finger at the sky. "You have a home," she said. "Not a question." "I have lumber that remembers my hands," I said. "Home's a bigger word. Maybe it's a word two voices have to speak at the same time." "La." We took to work like people who've discovered prayer without fancy words. She strung more warp. I mended the porch post. In between tasks, we planned how to move cattle, so they'd be between us and any rider coming mean. How to put the schoolmarm's brother on watchdown, valley for $1 and a pie. How to use the arroyo as a pocket, not a trap. I wrote to a friend in the U.S. Marshal's office who owed me for a winter I pulled him out of, not asking favors, just reminding him the map still had our names on it. 3 evenings later, the first rain in months stitched itself across the pasture. The drops were fat and honest. Aiyana stepped out into it with her face upturned, the woven strip in her hands catching water like a river catches gold light. The red deepened, the black shone, the small break for mercy pulsed. "Do you miss them?" she asked, not suddenly, just when the rain gave us room. "Your wife, your boy." "Then, every day," I said. That kind of truth does not tremble. Grief taught me to walk with a limp in the soul. I don't mind the limp anymore. It tells me where love passed through. She listened like a person who builds the shape of you inside her and tries to get it right. My mother used to say the earth remembers how we tread it. If we walk like thieves, the dirt grows hard. If we walk like people who honor it, the dirt grows soft and the seeds take root. "Oh, she sounds like a woman the country would have liked to keep," I said. "She lives in the quiet places," Aiyana said, and I knew then that memory was a country that granted visas without asking the color of your flag. We slept better that night. Not deep sleep isn't deep when men with small ideas are still at large, but cleaner. In the middle of the dark, I woke to the rustle of skirts and the hush of a door. I found Aiyana on the porch with her palm against the bullet scar. "It will fade," I said. "I want to remember," she answered. "Not like a wound, like a knot in a tree stronger than what was smooth." I stood beside her because that's what a man can offer sometimes. Shoulder, silence, presence like a post that won't rot in the first flood. Days stacked. Slade discovered that his friends liked him less when daylight read his ledgers. Jesse Pike sang to save his own skin and named 2 more. Ephraim tried to skip the county line and found the marshals deeper than he thought. The cousin, Lena, came to Rosa's back door and cried a storm that washed nothing clean but watered something that might one day grow. We didn't know. Some seeds take years to figure out their name. Aiyana chose to stay. Not forever. Forever is a word the land laughs at, but for the next work, the next season, the next act of trust we could make with our hands. She took the old storeroom and turned it into a weaving room. She taught me to card wool that had opinions. I taught her to read the sky for hail the way a man reads faces in a saloon. She taught me to listen when the hungry parts of me growled for control. I taught her where the snow piles when it's mean, and where to dig a path so calves live to bawl about it in spring. One afternoon we were stacking hay when a lone rider came down the ridge with the clumsy dignity of a lawman on a borrowed horse. Marshal Hardy dismounted with the stiffness of a man who'd fought Arizona rocks and lost. He tipped his hat to Aiyana first, a good sign. "Mercer," he said. "Got your letter. Been a while." "Too long," I said. "You owe me a winter and a bottle." "I paid the bottle," he said. "Still owe the winter. Look." He dug in his coat and handed me a folded paper. "Warrant for Barrow. Interstate contraband. The kind of charge even his friends can't drink away." I felt my chest give up an ache I didn't know it had been carrying. "You'll need a place to sit while the ink dries," I said.